Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Misconceptions. I'm really honored, and I feel quite privileged that I have the opportunity to have a conversation with Nicole Meyer. Nicole, welcome. So glad that you were able to say yes. So, Nicole is joining me from Australia. I think it's kind of cool. I'll just mention, even though this podcast will be published in a few months' time, but you're joining me from 2026 and I'm in 2025. It is 8:15 my time locally on December 31st, and it's already January 1st. By you tell me about the new year. Is it something to look forward to?
It is in regards to reflection, knowing what I've done in the past year and what I can look forward to achieve in the coming year.
I love that. So, our conversation, many of you may be familiar. I've actually referenced Nicole's story when I teach about sexual abuse prevention. But this is and I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about what you lived through. It was one of the biggest cases, I think, in religious Jewish communal history. And it was one that took tremendous bravery for you and your siblings to come forward. And the risk and the consequences of that were significant. And the focus of our conversation is going to kind of veer into what it means to be a mother who has survived and has lived through sexual abuse as a child. And we'll get there eventually. But for those of you who typically listen to my stories or conversations, it typically is relating to maternal health. And I think this does relate to maternal health. And for those of you who also know my work in terms of sexual abuse prevention, this is just where it aligns right in the middle. So I am very, very humbled that you're willing to do this conversation with me. So thank you. Let's start with tell me who Nicole Meyer is.
I am a mum of four beautiful children, and I am one of seven siblings. My oldest sister sadly passed away over 10 years ago, very, very dearly missed. And I have made it my life mission, I guess, since acknowledging that I'm a survivor, to support other survivors and to advocate and to put words to very difficult topics that people within religious communities don't necessarily know about or can speak about or can feel validated around because there's still so much privacy and shame around those topics. And through my healing, I've been able to put words to so many of those unspoken about topics in regards to abuse and in regards to healing, as well as working and just beginning to work on my law degree so I can hopefully one day
Oh,
work within the legal system and help survivors through their trials as well.
oh, I did not know that. I love hearing that. I'm thrilled to hear that because I know that sometimes at that level of knowledge and education, you really will have access to help so many more people. So kudos to you for taking it all the way there. Take us back a little bit. Tell us where your story begins.
So my story begins as a firstborn, being born in Australia. My parents immigrated here, two older siblings born overseas. I went to a Dutch school from prep onwards, and when I was around, didn't grow up in a very easy home life at all. Pretty abusive and emotionally, physically, in every way possible. And around my high school years is when a new principal entered our school, a new female principal who was warm, charismatic, really caring, very knowledgeable, which I, as someone who loved learning and wanted to know more, I can still even remember to this day teachings that I learned in those years because I just was so hungry for more learning. So it was great to have a new face that wasn't in the community join the school.
Was she somebody who was like sought out after, like, was she somebody who just showed up in the community and was hired? Or this was somebody who people like sought out to hire her, they vetted her. What went into her coming into this position of tremendous power?
There was a position needed for year 11 and 12, which kind of was classed as like a seminary. They wanted a mechaneches for year 11 and 12 to carry on the legacy of Sarah Schneer. It was called Beis Miriam Leah after the Rebbetzin that was the leader of those two grades for many years. And so they wanted someone to fill that position specifically. So to be a real role model in Ruchnius and inspire us to grow further and to know more and to really come out of there as Bas Yisrael, the school's proud to present that this is what has come out from the school under this person's leadership. So they did look carefully for someone that would fit that bill. And Malka Leifer seemed to be that person. She came from a pretty choshev family and some rubbish connections, had children, young, came with glowing references, and seemed to be the perfect fit for what the school was looking for, particularly for year 11 and 12, although she did within a couple of years take over the school, as in became head of the whole school.
How old was she at the time?
Probably
Around
low to mid 30s.
30s. Okay. And tell us where the story goes off the rails.
Probably in year 10 already, which is the year I was in when she arrived. I was about 15 and a half, is when she arrived in the school. I think in hindsight, we can see what went off the rails was that she would use physical touch in a way that no other teachers ever used. So hands on shoulders, hands on legs, and that was very unexpected because no teacher touched a student. It just wasn't done, and no other teacher had before. So that was unusual, but it came under her care and her warmth and her charisma, and she was everywhere and nowhere, and the school was flying but not. She just knew everything that was going on. She knew everyone. She knew people's families. She became very quickly involved in everyone's lives, and she slowly started paying more attention to girls at different times, pulling girls out of class. And teachers would respect because, like I said, she became head eventually. So if she knocked on the door and said, I need to speak to so and so,
Sure.
it wouldn't matter. She would take them into her room and close the door, close the blinds, lock the door. And no one raised an eyebrow at that because she was head. And why would anyone think that anything wrong is going on? So all these kind of behaviors happened around and amongst everyone and anyone that was around the school. But I would say really went off the rails from the beginning, but no one saw the red flags, not
Mm-hmm.
even ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And so she again, I'm asking you to share as much or as little as you'd like to share, but she began her inappropriate relationship by pulling some of these girls closer to her over periods of time. That it sounded like touching behaviors began almost immediately, but then escalated into more sexual touching. What would you like to share? Just so people understand, I think one of the greatest challenges is very often people see the abusers as male. And I think people have a hard time imagining, I know that people have a hard time imagining a female abuser. Um, I don't know why that is, but I think it just seems so, we've been sold this idea of like the scary guy in the raincoat, but that is not what we're primarily teaching anymore. But what is it about her? What did she get? What did she do? What did she do to you? And I know that it wasn't only two, that there were multiple people who were her victims.
I think she had an innate way to know which students were vulnerable for particular reasons from their homes. Like I said, she gathered knowledge, so she understood that. And I think for me, particularly for my sisters, we were so severely lacking in any emotional connection, attachments, care, even physical neglect, that when she swooped in and she was loving and she was caring and she even sometimes gave food, it was the sense of someone is actually caring for me. And I still, even all these years later, like over 20 years, I can still say she was a caring person. I cannot see her as fully evil because she was caring when no one else in my life was. And I think that's what is the harm of female perpetrators, that the very thing that we know females to be, maternal, caring, nurturing, is what she used to cover up her abuse, which
Mm-hmm.
made it so much more difficult to spot because she wasn't cold, disconnected. She did have some time where she like was mean to some girls, or you could see which girls she didn't like, but those weren't the girls that she abused. So it was very, it was so cloaked in all her care and warmth that so when she called me into her office and closed the door and put my hair behind my ears and put her hand on my back, on my leg, and pulled me in for a hug before it even escalated way, way further, it at that point it was still this person cares about me. It wasn't this is wrong and I'm freezing up because my body's telling me it's wrong, but I don't know it's wrong. And then further is going to happen because I don't have the ability to say no or to move away or to consent verbally, to not consent verbally.
Hmm. And I think one of the things that we know about people who are experiencing abuse is that, I heard somebody today, I was listening to another podcast about somebody who was a survivor, and he was saying, I like this man he was it was swim instructor. He said, I like this man at the pool. I like this man on the playground. I did not like the man behind the closed doors. But there was parts of this person, exactly as you just said, like there was parts of this person that he loved and that cared for him and attended to him, as with her, that maternal ability is what helped create this confusion of there's a part of her that I love and want and need. And then there's this part of her that I maybe have to tolerate or accept in order to get those more loving parts. Did you make that connection in later years? What was that like?
The connection I made was that slowly but surely she infiltrated into my life, my entire life. And there won't be time in this podcast to go into that. And maybe one day I'll write a book, but the entire 7 years, she fully controlled every aspect of my life more and more as time went on. Then I worked under her. And just as you said, when I was in court and went through trial, the defense lawyer, of course, wanted to throw me. What did they do? They pulled out two letters I had written her when I was
Mm,
19 years old in my first year of teaching, in appreciating her and thanking her for making me smile and helping me teach and everything, and made me read them out to court to
oof,
prove that obviously our relationship was consensual. Not understanding, and I know that I explained that question well, that on one hand, I absolutely respected her and liked her and worked with her and loved my job. I was so passionate. I loved my teaching years. And on the other hand, I was completely dissociated from the abuse that was happening and constantly happening for years. So
yeah,
that split was so strong. So
yeah,
yes, in hindsight, I can think that that maternal care and love is what pulled me in and probably kept me from understanding possibly the abuse that was happening underneath it. But I think then that's really the dissociation kicked in, and then it was life was
mhm,
going on, but all that
mhm.
abuse was happening with still having a fully functioning work relationship with
Right,
her every
right.
day.
What prevented you? Because I think this is one of the number one questions I get from students, is what prevented you from telling anybody what was happening? There was a point that you understood that something was wrong. And for some survivors, I hear that it took them a long time to realize it was like there was a part of them that knew it was wrong. There was a part of them that had been convinced that this was something special, that they couldn't tell anybody else, but they knew that there was like it was something unique between them. And there were those that understood this was wrong and were just too frightened to tell or didn't believe anybody would believe them. So for you, what is it that held you back from sharing this information or what was going on?
I didn't know what was happening, what was going on. I had no words, I had no knowledge, I had no education. It was literally being pregnant and the
Mm.
protection of my own firstborn child that made me kick into she can't do this to me because I've got a child in me. I'm
Oof.
pregnant.
So I just want to be clear because I think this is where things get a little bit messy for people to understand is that the abuse persisted beyond your childhood years. So it started when she moved in and when you were in 10th grade, but it persisted into your adulting years of working for her, working in the school, working around her. And that's why there was that threat of like, was this a consensual relationship? But obviously it started in 10th grade, it wasn't. Um, and so once you were, even as a married woman, and then being a pregnant woman, that's when you began to say, I can't do this anymore. I can't allow this anymore.
Yes, on some level. Yeah.
What do you mean on some level?
Meaning I made sure I wasn't in the same room with her, in a room alone with her in a position where she could lie fully on top of me, being that I was pregnant.
Mm.
But that didn't stop the abuse altogether. It wasn't like I had this internal understanding of she will not touch me ever again.
There
I
was
just
no
had the
point.
understanding
Mhm.
she will just not be alone with me in a room in that position again.
Mm. And so, talk to me a little bit about that awareness. That this is where I would like to shift a little bit into that maternal identity. That when you began to develop that maternal identity of being a mother of a pregnant, you have a baby, you're pregnant. Tell me a little bit more about what your thoughts were like at that time.
It's going to sound awful, but this will show my innocence. I literally thought that because she was a bigger woman, that her heaviness and her largeness would squash my baby.
Hmm.
That's all I thought. That's all my very young 21-year-old brain, very closed community, not knowing anything brain thought at that time. And that kicked in without me even having words for it. I remember the thought clear as day. I remember that being, she cannot lie on top of me anymore. And my baby is the most important thing in my life. And that's all it was. It wasn't anything deeper than that. It was this incredible voice that just popped up at that time. And I
Mm.
knew that that was my child was more important than anything.
I also I have to say that I find it fascinating that you being pregnant did not in any way like um like dissuade your abuser from harming you. Like it didn't change anything for her.
She was pregnant herself when she abused.
Mm, 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 mm. Oh, we say these things out loud and they hold so much weight and so much power. And I want to just give that moment of there's so much complexity here and there's so much emotion. Okay. in talking about what it became, what it was like when you gave birth, and became a mother, when did the abuse stopped when you were pregnant and did not restart after you gave birth?
It still continued on some
It
level
did.
after I gave birth. I was back at work 6 weeks later.
Hmm. Hmm. When did it finally end for you?
Haven't yet fully processed that whole space and time, particularly as the
Hmm.
courts cut my date of abuse stopping the day I got married and didn't allow any of that further abuse to enter into the court process, which was very painful for me. Again, because of that lack of understanding in the general public about abuse continuing past the age of 18. And my sister disclosed in the beginning of 2008. Overseas in Israel, I confirmed that disclosure to that social worker slash therapist on the phone. That's when it stopped,
Hmm. Hmm.
when she left the country.
And they listened to her at that point in time. And she was in Israel. She shared this information with somebody. Did that information come back to Australia?
Yes. And
That
within
was
3 days, she was gone.
she was gone. Okay. So you are married, you have a child. She has now left your life. Can you talk a little bit about, one of the things I know about survivors is this feeling of like there's relief that it stops, but there may be a part of it that you miss. Is that something that you experienced, this feeling of like there was a part of that maternal and like the likable parts of her? Did you experience that as well?
No. When
No.
she left, it felt like the school went into an absolute sense of grief. And I was very quickly early pregnancy with my second child.
Mm.
And it was not, it was like she'd gone out of my life, disconnected. I didn't even realize I had trauma. I didn't realize I had been abused. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't say anything. I just continued life. It wasn't until I was pregnant with my third, and it wasn't until I was pregnant with my fourth. And on the day that I found out I was pregnant with my fourth, is the day I gave my police statement and spoke for the first time words that I never thought I would speak. And it was not enough words, but it was something.
Who invited you into that conversation? Like, where did they know to go to you to have this conversation?
It was early 2012, and my 2011, sorry, my two sisters had given statements at different times in the year, and it took until October 2011 for me to be able to walk into a police station and do that as well.
Oof. Okay, so you're pregnant with your fourth. You have three young children, I'm assuming, and one on the way. Tell me a little bit about when you began to understand abuse and the manipulation and the relationship that was so far from safe and so far from nourishing. What Talk to me from what you remember about what that meant for you as a mother.
I still didn't understand properly, but the impact of saying those words and understanding that I, as a mother of three really young kids, little ones, and a fourth on the way, had just made a step that I never thought I could do to make a different future for my children. And as much as it wasn't actioned at that point, and I didn't feel the strength of what I was starting to do at that point. I knew that taking that step out of the silence and the shame was going to make sure that my children will not grow up in the world that I grew up in, to be vulnerable and to have be targets in a way because of their lack of education or awareness, or with an abuser still being out there. So there were so many things going around that, but in the same time, the impact of giving a statement when I was pregnant set me up for a really difficult pregnancy. And in hindsight, if I had the real knowledge and awareness, I would have not chosen that day or during that pregnancy to make that step, because it was enormous. It completely unsettled me. From then on, my life pretty much changed, really, doing that
Mm.
very first step. So, as a mother, I think it was really knowing and looking at my three tiny little kids and seeing them and thinking to myself, I do not want them to grow up in a world that is unsafe, to grow up in a world where there's no education, to not understand what is happening to them. So when I gave that police statement, all that was in my mind as much as it wasn't yet verbalized. But it was that,
Mm,
I think it was that that gave me the courage to do so
mm.
while I was still working in the school that I was abused in.
Yeah. In an environment that perpetrated it, like meaning that that
Yes.
environment that allowed this level of freedom and, risk to be played out in that way as well. Tell me, you said that the pregnancy was difficult. Can you describe what that means so people understand?
The entire pregnancy, I thought my child wasn't going to be born alive. I think I felt that I had not done the wrong thing, but that giving the police statement, putting words to abuse and words to horrific acts would impact my unborn child. I He was obviously one that didn't kick very often, so I didn't go. I wasn't super anxious to keep going to get checks, but that just fed my anxiety all the way until the day he was born. I still wouldn't allow the nurses to bring in a crib into the room when they bring it in ready when the baby's going to be born. I said, no, take it out, because I was that worried that I wasn't. It was, I think, all the anxiety and trauma that had been festering underneath that I hadn't dealt with. Didn't go to therapy, didn't have support, didn't talk to anyone after I gave my statement, didn't follow up with absolutely anyone. So I was holding that completely alone and raising three little ones. And at my fourth, my oldest wasn't even 5 yet, and working. So it was like, it was just this perfect storm of everything, like my body taking a hit and all that anxiety going to my unborn child. And then when he was born, and he was the most smiley, happy baby, I just realized Hashem gave me such a gift, because he
Mhm,
was everything that I didn't think and know I would be Zocha to have. And then he just came out with, like, he was smiling and cheerful and such a happy baby all the time. And I took such comfort from that, that me giving a statement didn't impact his personality or his brain. And he still showed me that whatever care I had been able to still give him when
mhm,
he was in
mhm,
me wasn't, yeah, it wasn't
mhm.
negatively impacted. And I really felt that clearly once he was born.
And that and did that persisted after the birth and for your postpartum, like during your postpartum months, that stayed with you? Did you at any point revert back to the fear or the worry or the anxiety? Did you remember that showing up?
I probably had postpartum depression, but I would not have even known it was that. Meaning, I had
Hmm.
four little ones under the age of 5. I went back to work after 12 weeks for him. I was fully functioning, running my house, no cleaning help or any of that kind of stuff. I did everything myself, obviously, with my husband. So I was struggling. I was struggling a lot, because you can't just give a police statement and unearth abuse without it impacting. It will come, it will find its way until, but I didn't. I didn't deal with it for years. I just held it all.
When did you finally say, like, okay, this is not, I need to I need to care for myself?
Probably after I had an interaction with a male therapist that wasn't safe, and I realized I don't know enough about
Mm,
red flags and I need to figure it out. I can protect others, but I'm not yet protecting myself enough.
wow.
So that's when I realized I need to go to therapy, figure stuff out, and learn more about myself. And I haven't stopped since then.
I'm thankful that you acknowledge that. And I definitely imagine that part of that is also figuring out how to create safety for your children, right? Because I think one of the things that I want to make very clear is it's not our responsibility to keep ourselves safe as children. It's our adults' responsibility to keep our children safe. And sometimes we can, and sometimes we try, and sometimes we're not successful. But I do believe that, it's the parent's job. So what was that like for you as you became a parent of small children, with the recognition of, like, I don't know what those flags are. I don't know what safety feels like and looks like. How did you begin to develop that as a parent, not only for yourself, but for your children?
I think it was a lot easier to do it with my children than for myself.
Sure.
I educated my children from young about their body parts and about what people aren't allowed to touch and which body parts, to the point where like my youngest, when he was 3 in kinder, he told me when he came home that a boy had pulled down his underwear in the bathrooms. And he had the language to tell me that. And it
Mm,
wasn't sinister, but I called the school and they were on top of it and they spoke to the child, and it didn't happen again. But I'll never forget that, because that was proof to me that I'd given my children language to tell me that someone had touched them without their consent, even if I didn't use the word consent at that time, but had touched their private parts. And all along the way, I've worked out I don't know how, probably just from my own lived experience, that my children, I didn't want to trauma dump on them. I didn't want to bring them up in a world that is scary or fearful or consequences. I wanted them to feel empowered and educated. I wanted them to have strength to know that if something happened, I'm a safe person for them to come to. And it doesn't mean that their world's going to fall apart. We will just work as we go along. And I continuously spoke to them about safe people, about recognizing their own bodies, ways to understand and feel if someone's not safe, even just someone you walk past on the street that doesn't make you feel great. Where are they noticing it? We would have communications and conversations so that I feel that even now, just my older son went to yeshiva and he's 18. He just went about 7 weeks ago. And that's huge for me to let go of him. But I do feel that he is empowered enough and educated enough that if something happened, he hopefully will call me and tell me. And I said to him, it doesn't mean I'm going to pull you out. It means we're going to talk and see what you want to do and work through it with you. But I was able to even say that to him before he left, which is huge
Right.
because no one ever said that to me.
Right.
And I have those conversations with my children constantly, particularly as I became more and more public and they knew Malka Leifer and they know her name and they don't know the details of the abuse. They know she wasn't a safe person to the point where they can come and say, in short, this person and this person is not safe. We know to stay away from them. And that means I've done well enough. We're never going to be able to protect our children from the world. Like my son is overseas now. I can't hold him forever. They have to be educated and empowered enough, and we can just hope and pray that something won't happen to them. And if something chas v'shalom does, they have words to straight away be able to share and get support that they need.
And that's actually what the data shows. I mean, in the United States, the Center for Missing and Exploited Children says that specifically, you really cannot prevent abuse from happening the first time, but you can prevent it from happening again. And when we look at it from a trauma lens, it's the repeated abuse. It's that constant, like, nobody protected me and I didn't have the language to speak about it. That is where, or I didn't know that I could ask somebody for help. I didn't know who I could talk to. That was something that you said to me before. We had spoken a number of years ago, and you said to me, I wish I had understood that there was somebody else other than my parents that could have helped me. That for whatever reason, your parents were unavailable, but emotionally or practically or intellectually unavailable to help you. But you said, I understood that there were other people in my life that could have helped, that could have stopped this, that could have prevented this from continuing. But a child victim, a child survivor really has a difficult time seeing the broader view of the world. And that is something that we can offer our children, is the knowledge of, like, there are other people in your life that can help, that can figure it out. Where else did you notice as a parent, where were other spaces that you notice now, maybe looking back a little bit more, where you're like, okay, that behavior that I did, or that experience that I had with my child, worry wise or anxiety wise or fear wise, that's because of what happened to me. Were you
Well,
aware
that
of those
happens.
moments? Yeah.
Yeah, that happens all the time. So my kids will all say that they need to talk to their MA in camp because I was abused multiple camps. So for me, when my children were young, I thought I'm going to need them to have trackers, like hearing trackers and location trackers. So I need to hear that nothing's happening to them and I need to know where they are. As I worked on my healing, so by the time my first child went to camp, I was able to let him go with the condition that he calls me to check in every day. I don't need to hear all the activities, who they're bunking with. I don't care about that. I want to say, are you safe? Are you feeling safe? Has anyone come into the bathroom with you? Has anyone come into your bed? Very simple questions that they are used to, they're aware of, that can be unsafe situations. They can answer me, and the phone call can be less than a minute. I spoke to both the schools where my children go, and that has continued. As they've gotten older, particularly the boys in the older years, they can get away with calling me every second day or
Hmm.
every third day. And I've learned to relax my guard a little and trust the school, see the processes they have in place, and be okay with it. But it is a huge anxiety for me. I will get majorly triggered on the day they go to camp and not feel good until they're home because the knowledge of what has gone on in camp for myself, particularly, has is still with me very strongly.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
the same when they go, sleepovers. I stopped a couple of years ago, but when they did have sleepovers when they were younger, it's the same fear. It's the same around anyone, male members in other people's houses, or like but it's again, I've worked really hard not to put it onto them. So the one about camp, they'll all say unequivocally they know that they need to check in with me every day. Other ones, it's more me working through my trauma, sorting it through, going to therapy, talking about it, and then giving them a balanced view of what the
Hmm.
situation is rather than scaring them. I've
Hmm.
never wanted them to be scared of the world. but I've wanted them to feel empowered. So it's just that balance, which I've definitely found I've done pretty well over the years because I've worked on myself.
And I
If
think
I
it's
was
a
still
work
in
in
the place I was
progress,
in 2000,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right. I don't think that anybody ever just like fully resolves the matter and is therefore never frightened again. I mean, I think
Yeah,
there's a part of normative parenting that is frightened that we have our children away from us or that a child is at risk or threat or, of abuse. I think I probably
yeah.
think about it more than most people because of what I teach, but it is something that I think is something that we have to like kind of modulate. We moderate it a little bit of like, am I overly imposing my worries on my child versus more about like kind of holding it internally. um if we can back this up, well, you mentioned something about being abused in camp. I think this is something that is a little complicated for people to understand, and I want to hear it in your words. The experience of that, we know that children who are abused by one person very often are abused by another. They become this like identified victim, and it is not the fault of the child, to be very clear. Can you help our audience understand how that happens? How is it that it became understood by another predator, by somebody else who was out to harm a child, that you'd be a good victim to go after? Like, it's not written on your body. How do they know?
It's a question I ask myself. Is there some non-verbal message that my body's giving out? And I think the way one therapist explained to me before, she said, like years ago, she said to me, predators sense a child that's had their ring broken. And
Mm,
when they sense that, they know that that child is an easier target than another child. And so that's the way she explained it to me. And that's the way I understood it for myself. It's not something that I can see, but it's something that others can sense. So therefore, I've got to work on understanding red flags better. The camp situations was Malka Leifer herself.
ah,
Unfortunately, there were other places of abuse in my life with others, but the camps were Malka Leifer, and that happened in view of others and around. And camp is a place, unfortunately, where if there aren't adults noticing red flags, abuse can happen. And I know my story and the perpetrator is not a unique story, unfortunately.
no, not at all. I just, again, like I said, this podcast that I was listening to, and I've read this book called Chosen, a memoir of another survivor that was just very difficult to read. How many people failed the child? How many people saw and knew and were like, oh, that one's really touchy, or that one's got weird boundaries, or that one's just weird, or just like, yeah, no, stay away from her or him. And how many adults just turned a blind eye? And how do you reconcile that in your life? Like now, as a mother, like what happened to all those other adults in your life? And I mean the professional ones, not just your parents, but like the ones in school who saw the behaviors that nobody spoke up, that nobody said, this is not okay. Let's stop this behavior. Or even if they did, they weren't listened to.
It's a hard one for me because school was my life. I went there from prep to year 12, and then I taught there right after year 12, after extensive teacher training from Malka Leifer, from other professionals. And I was passionate and I loved it. And I taught for 10 years, best
Mm.
10 years ever, minus the abuse, of course. Um, I struggle to answer that question. The only way that I can reconcile with it is that it was 20 years ago. It was, or even over 20 years ago. I don't think anyone would have imagined that Malka Leifer was abusing, even if they saw red flag behavior, grooming, dodgy behaviors, because she was female.
Yeah.
Because why would we ever think that a female would abuse? She did things in front of people, directly in front of people. I don't want to be explicit here, but I can think right now of 5 examples where there people witnessed what she did. Someone only told me very recently that they walked in to her abusing me one time. And, so they witnessed that. And then I think in hindsight and reflection, there can be a lot of validation and acknowledgement that it happened, but that hasn't translated to support in general. That hasn't translated in at least, I would say, 20 to 30 people going to the police and giving a statement to support my sisters and I for our case.
Meaning they
Why?
did, they only, no, they did not go. Right.
Not one.
Not one of the people who witnessed it went to give
Whoever
statements.
whoever gave statements were the people in the school that the police questioned back in 2008 when she left, or 2011, sorry, when we gave our police statements. No one, not a single person since then spoke and
And we know
supported
there
our
has
case.
to, and we have to know that there are other survivors. There's no way she only went after
Oh,
you.
I'm talking about survivors haven't spoken,
Right.
that,
I'm
and I
saying,
know quite a few, and I'm talking about everyone around, anyone else that could give
yeah,
statements.
right.
Yeah.
And have other survivors come forward to you privately?
One I'm in constant contact with, we're close friends, and others, as soon as I became more public, kind of dropped.
Pulled away. Yeah. Maybe maybe we have to address, I think we have to address the reality of like, what are the consequences of coming forward? Right? I can't pretend that there are none and that, every abuser, so many of the people I've heard speak and have told me their stories and have spoken on behalf of the program that I work in and facilitate, right? They have said to me, the question from the children when I talk about this in seventh and eighth grade, mostly is when we're doing the more kind of specific education about this, about abuse specifically, first time we use the word abuse or sexual abuse. And the children always say when they hear the story, well, did she tell anybody? Like, did what happened to the abuser? Like, what happened to her and what happened to him? And they have such a complex time understanding that no, they never reported. And no, they did not tell anybody, and nobody else knows. Like, I have somebody whose audio is recorded for me, and I use just her audio from another state in another city. And but her voice is so powerful, and it was her brother. And she said, and the students all say, well, what happened to him? And it's like, he went to yeshiva and then he got married and he has kids and they see each other at Yontif meals. And like, they're mind blown because that's the standard, is that nobody comes forward, or so few people will come forward or say, this happened to me as well. Tell us a little bit about the consequence of coming forward.
One of the biggest consequences was the shadchan who made my husband and I's marriage, who I remained close to all the years. On my first campaign trip, going overseas to lobby the politicians to bring her back, she said to me, I want to wish you hatzlacha, but I can't because I don't agree with what you're doing. And I love her. And we've spoken about this since then. And she has shifted and changed her thinking. But I will never forget that first time because it was so different and wrong. And my late sister, she was one that said, as well as others, Malka Leifer is the Chil Hashem, not you.
Mm.
She
I
is the
just want
one
to
that,
take,
because there was this
I want to
concept,
just take 1 minute. What is your older sister's name? I want to use her
Dalia,
name.
Dalia,
Dahlia, Galia.
Dalia. Yeah,
Dahlia with a D, right?
yeah.
Dahlia. I want to honor Dahlia because I know that she had a very difficult, she was also a victim, correct?
No, she
She was not a
wasn't,
victim.
but she
Okay.
was impacted. It was, yeah,
Okay. And so just to honor Dahlia and her memory here, and your other sister, your second sister who was in the courts with you, right? What is
my
her
two
name?
younger sisters.
Your
Yes,
younger
Dusty and
sisters.
Ellie.
Tassie and Ellie. And so, because it's not just your story, it's the story of all of the sisters together. Yeah, so talk a little bit more about what that means, the consequences. So, for somebody who doesn't know this story, because I'm going on this assumption that everybody's heard this, and I think I probably should say a line just to say that Malka Leifer was kind of just picked up and plucked out of Australia, went to Israel, and the court, you fought for years for an extradition. There was no extradition agreement between Australia and Israel at the time, and Israel fought the extradition. Like, there was a lot of like hesitancy of getting her to come see the courts and to, kind of respond to the indictments. How many years did it take you for her to be extradited?
She was extradited in 2021 and statements were given 2011. Trial was 2023. So
Listen to that number. Listen to how many years and how much strength and money and time and energy it takes to have like a sustained effort. And that's part of the goal, is like, well, we'll just like drag it out as long as possible and she'll go away. Or not the abuser, but the one who is bringing the accusation, we'll shush her up enough, and hopefully she'll disappear. Your courage is the one that forced and pushed that extradition to say, no, we're not just going away quietly. And so after, what was that, 11, 12 years or so, she was extradited to Australia. She was convicted. Ultimately, what was she formally convicted of? What was her like crime?
18 charges of rape, sexual assault, and yeah. There's a
abuse.
bunch of charges
And
around that.
what was
Yeah.
her conviction? What was her sentencing?
15 years, including time served.
Yeah.
Nowhere near enough.
Nowhere. And she was free in Israel. Even though the story was out, there was a lot of, kind of awareness around who she was. And, she was in many ways protected by the Israeli system, which was a really egregious to me. That's a crime unto itself. But this is not uncommon, unfortunately. So coming back to when you said you went to Israel to campaign to get her extradition, kind of executed. Tell me a little bit more about, you said that Shadchan, your matchmaker, um, said such a, did not show support. What other consequences are there for coming forward?
A lot of silence. So I felt a huge sense of a lot of the people in the community that I grew up with, that I taught all their daughters, that I taught multiple daughters, that some of them taught me when I was in school. I lost all of that. I didn't lose it completely, but I lost it because I was doing something so different and so public and so against the community, but it wasn't. It was against abuse and protecting other victims. So it really, I didn't realize how much I lost. It's only over the years I realized. And I just understood that a lot of times people don't know exactly what to do with me.
Mm.
And I had to make a very strong choice. That is what I'm doing going to impact my children's shidduchim? Because that's what people said to me. If you keep doing what you're doing, your children's shidduchim will be impacted. And my answer is, well, if the family that's looking into my children, who are absolutely incredible, beautiful, amazing children, are not going to look at us because of what I've done, then I'm not interested in them. And the shidduchim not about me anyway, it's about my child. But it's something that I've sat with, particularly now as my oldest is 18 and my second just turned 17. So it's this knowledge that I'm going to soon see what has been, and it's awful that I even think like that, but what has been the impact of what I have done and continue to do? And are
Mm-hmm.
people able to accept me wholly, understand me as a mother of 4 children who are growing up, Baruch Hashem, from and connected and doing and incredible children, as well as a mother who is an advocate in the world, a public voice, done a documentary. This is all of me. I'm a survivor, but I'm also a mother. And I'm a mother who's invested in wanting the world to be safer for children, and particularly children in our community. And I'm not going to be silent for others' comfort. My silence is what allows abuse to continue, and I
Mm-hmm.
will not be silent.
Yeah. I will not be silent for somebody else's comfort. I think that is ultimately, such a charge forward. Um, we haven't talked about your husband. When did your husband learn, first of all, that you were a victim, that you were being harmed by this woman?
Oh, I think um, when she left in 2008, so we got married in 2006. When she left in 2008, early 2008, I kind of just remember having this really light, breezy, easy conversation. Oh, she did some inappropriate stuff. Yeah, she wasn't so safe. Like, I was so in shock and dissociated that I didn't take it anything further than the most superficial level possible. In 2011, when I wanted to give a police statement, I remember him being so confused. I'm like, what do you have to give a police statement about? And I was like, oh, um, yeah, she did a bit more stuff than I said a couple of years ago, and I think I need to talk to the police. So it was that. That was all. Still not able to really talk about it properly. And
Did he
then
come with you
as
to the
it
police
became,
statement?
no,
Oh,
no, completely by myself. No,
has he ever heard it?
no.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it took years. So his support was always there in the background. I left little kids behind in 2015 for my sister's yard site, 2017, 18, 19, 20 for campaign trips. He was always there. I used to write lists of lunch boxes, which kid liked what, like list and list of washing and everything. And he just did that steadily, constantly. He was there in the background, holding the fort while I went out to the world to seek justice. And that was his support. And then it came to the trial in 2023. And I really thought hard about it. And I said, I don't want to hurt you, but I don't want you to come to trial
Really?
because I need my life to be, it's been separate for so long because he didn't know how to support me in the beginning. And I learned to manage myself, like support in the emotional sense around all that, not physical sense. Um, and so I think it's better for our marriage that you stay home with the kids and I do this process myself. And I moved out of home for about 4 weeks. The trial was 9, but for 4.5 weeks, my sisters and I lived in a flat near court because we were there every single day. We did not miss a single day of court, and we were filming as well. And I popped in the house in Purim, saw my kids for the Suda, and popped back because there was court on Purim as well. It was that whole beginning of the year. Um, and I think that was still the best decision to make because I think he would have been so emotionally impacted by what came out in court and hearing me and seeing what I went through that I don't know if he would have been able to healthily recover from that because of his care and love for me. So I felt I can manage myself, which I did. And I want him to be a safe person for the kids. I don't want the kids to be unsettled. What I did do was take him and my kids for a tour through court. They met the prosecutor before trial started. So they had a felt sense of where their mother was going to be for the next
Mm,
bunch of weeks. They can visualize it, they can picture it. It doesn't feel this scary, unknown thing for them.
mm.
And he came to that as well. And then but he did come to the documentary. He came and sat at the documentary premiere, and that was the first time he ever came to something like of my journey in that regard.
What was that like
So
for you for him to see it?
yeah, I wanted him there. I
Okay.
wanted him to make the decision, and he did, and he came, and I'm happy he did because
Mm,
he got to see. He got to see a lot in a cohesive way. Not that he doesn't live with me, so of course he
mhm,
sees a lot, but he got to see my journey in parts
mhm.
of it he would have not seen, like Israel and the filming and all of that.
Yeah. Who taught you that language? Like, who taught you the language of, I don't think we are ever really taught how to communicate with our spouses, but like, who taught you the language of this works for me, this doesn't work for me, building that trusted relationship with each other, communication of it's not rejection. Like, you had to learn that somewhere in order to
Yeah, I did a
communicate
lot
that.
of work.
So tell me a little bit about what that process is like.
I think for me, the biggest thing after I had a male therapist that wasn't safe, and then I went through a female therapist who was emotionally really ended up being a very damaging therapy space, I realized I have to do a lot of work myself. Like, as much of that damaging female therapist for 3.5 years, it forced me to learn and learn and learn and learn so that I was able to leave her and find a much healthier therapist and just continuously work and work on myself to gain that awareness so that I understand exactly what's happening for me. And then I can translate that into my marriage and into my children. To have emotionally intelligent conversations with my children is incredible, to let them be aware of what's happening and why they're behaving a certain way, to get them to check and understand themselves
Hmm,
and
hmm,
their own worlds, inner
hmm.
world. So it's really, yeah, it's really been a lot of my own experiences that has pushed me to understand that there are other damaging people out there and I have to really commit to doing the work. So I did.
And as a mother, like I think about also, like you said, how your body reacts to human touch, right? What was that transition like becoming a parent? First of all, we know that birthing itself, that process of being pregnant and birthing can be very complicated for a survivor. But what is it like then to have to hold and breastfeed and nurture physically your children, especially as they began to get older, closer to the age in which you were hurt. But even just before that, like you talk, touch can become complicated. Was that something that you experienced?
So Baruch Hashem, not with my children.
Hmm.
All the love that I had to give my children and I held in me and knew from a teenager already that I was never going to be the mother that my mother was to me, to my children, did not impact that in any way. The only struggle I had was the breastfeeding. Of
Hmm.
course, Hashem tested me in that area, and my youngest child refused to take a bottle. So, as much as it was triggering for me, I had to breastfeed him till 1 year old and
Wow.
only breastfeed, no bottle ever.
Hmm.
And I understood that to be an actual nisayon at the time because I had just given my statement. So, all those triggers were up
Anisayon,
there.
Anisayon is a test for somebody who doesn't know the Hebrew. That it was a test for you. Did it get easier? Like, did you figure out strategies to make it easier for you to breastfeed?
like I said, he was a beautiful, gorgeous, happy baby. So I think I
Hmm.
just focused on what he was bringing to the family and to our life, that I didn't try and focus on the trigger. But it's just a time that I remember was a really big struggle in that particular area. But I am always grateful that my hardship with touch in general, like I don't even, my sisters and brothers even respect the fact that I don't like to be hugged, has not at all translated to my children at all. But yes, when it came to my daughter turning 12, 13, and puberty, and knowing that she's now the age where Malka Leifer targeted me, it does play in my mind. And I have to think and look at her and be like, in a way, forgive myself. Because I think I hold so much, I still hold some self blame that I should have known. And then I look at my daughter's 15 and a half, literally the age I was when Malka Leifer first entered my life. And she's about to start year 10. And I'm like, she's so young and innocent and pure and beautiful. Like, yeah, it's going to be a big learning curve for me next year, I think, with my one
Hmm.
daughter. It's going to hit with my boys at different ages as well. And I worked through that. But I think with my daughter coming of this age, it's definitely, I might start to forgive myself a little bit more, which will
It's
be a
fascinating.
healing part for me.
I imagine. And it's fascinating because I've actually seen it where I'm working when I teach very often, unfortunately, I have Rebbeim, the rabbis that are teachers will come up to me and you just know you can, like you said, you can kind of smell it. Like as a therapist, you can sniff some of the stuff as well. And you're like, that man is a survivor. And it's happened now twice. And twice they have reached out to me. Again, I teach in different schools and different communities, not only in Philadelphia, just to be clear for privacy, but twice they have come up to me and said, where were you when I was in high school? And where was this program? But one of the men said to me, I don't understand. Like, why is it, why now? Why at this moment in time is it showing up for me? And he was abused from like, I think he said from like 7 to 12 years old. And I asked him how, oh, about 5 or 7. And he said, I said, how old is your son? And he said to me, he's 5. And it was like that moment of like, oh, this little innocent little boy who couldn't have said no. We don't even talk consent among children at all. He couldn't have said no. He didn't know what was happening, and he began to see himself in his, in his child's eyes. And so that really brought up so much feeling and emotion and pain for him that he had to begin to work through. So it does make sense. Anything else in terms of mothering or motherhood or pregnancy that you want to make sure people understand in terms of how the experience of abuse might change the experience of you spoke deeply to the, the kind of the fear or the threat that feels like is everywhere. Is there anything else that might be more subtle that you want to explain to those that are listening? How it changes?
I think, yeah, I think what I would just want to kind of encourage more is just be aware that abuse turns up. Like, I think there are many who keep it locked away, compartmentalized, dissociated from, and might not have that awareness that it is turning up in the way they interact with their children. So it might not mean going to the police and giving a report. It might not mean even saying it out loud, but it might mean thinking, I've been abused. I can acknowledge I'm a survivor, and then starting to see how that plays out in the way you interact with your children. Because if the connection is made, then children, if the adult, the parent, has that connection, the way they parent, even with the triggers and the traumas, can come out a lot differently than a
Hmm.
parent that has been abused, has no awareness, and the behaviors that they might play out as a result of the abuse is not is not at all is not they're not aware of it, so they don't understand why they're behaving certain ways. I think it's important to make those connections and to work on that within oneself, even if it doesn't mean going to give a police report or going
Hmm.
to therapy, but just having those connections within yourself. Because that's something I check amongst
Hmm.
myself all the time with mothering. And I always check myself, was my response this way because of an insane amount of triggers I have from my childhood abuse, from my teenage abuse, from my adult abuse, or is it because I'm fully aware and switched on to what my child needs right now? So
Hmm.
it's constantly checking myself because it does show up, but it's how I respond to how it shows up for me, then how it comes out onto my children.
And is there, I mean, I think that's such a valuable reminder. Is there anything that might be a blind spot that you can think of? And it could be like it's just too subtle to say that as a general statement, but are there any blind spots that you feel like people don't realize that's a trauma response, ladies? Like that's your mothering, that might feel like I'm being a good mom, but that's actually a trauma response.
maybe just needing to know where my kids are at all times, like having an
Mm.
awareness of them. But I think nowadays a lot of people are like that.
I
So I don't know if
agree.
it's just me.
I
So, but I
agree.
do sometimes think like, yeah, I think it's sometimes like it could be that my need to always have awareness of where they're at, or for them to update me often when they're out with friends, if they can, if they have a mobile kosher phone, they can text
Mhm.
me,
Of course.
is important. Yeah,
Right.
I think,
Yeah.
but I think also I think I'll give one example to quickly finish off. My second son went overseas for a month, and someone borrowed his phone for a couple of hours, and I couldn't get a hold of him, and I was frantic. Yes, I knew that was a trauma response. He's initially in a dorm. He's only there for 4 weeks. He's with a friend. I'll get hold of him, but I couldn't handle. What did my mind instantly think of? Someone saw he's Australian. Someone took his phone. They went and did something dodgy. They walked away with his phone. That probably did happen. I was going to call the company and find out what numbers that boy used. The kid came on the phone to me at midnight and begged me not to tell the Rebbe that he borrowed my son's phone. Red flag. And I worked through it. I didn't bring my son straight home. I told my son, this is what I was talking to you about. We could have not prepared for this. Do not lend your phone to anyone unless they're standing right in front of you, because I don't know
Mm.
what he used your phone for. And I can give you 15 reasons that are not good what he used your phone for, and why he
Hmm.
used your phone out of all the 300 kids that are there when you're
Ooh.
2 days after you came.
Hmm.
But that is where my mind goes. So
Got it.
that is a trauma response. When I spoke to another mother, whose son also went, I would have never thought of that.
Right. Right.
That is a trauma
Right.
response. So because I'm so aware of everything that's out there, I'm
All the
aware of
risk.
all the
Yeah.
possibilities and all the risks from something that might be
Mhm.
innocent. So
Yeah.
that's maybe the blind spot. And that's something I've had to balance and work through as well.
I appreciate that honesty. All right, let's close off our conversation with one or two misconceptions about being a survivor of abuse that you would like people to know.
I think one misconception is being a survivor does not mean I don't ever want to speak about it, or I don't want it acknowledged, or that it's scary to come up to me and say you saw something in the news or you read something and check in. I think silence, because you don't know what to say to a survivor, can be more painful than saying something,
Mm.
because the lack of support comes from silence. I appreciate so tremendously the day that I received a not guilty verdict, the amount of messages. And at the same time, I was like, but I've been doing this journey for 10, 12 years. All along the way, there's been media all along the way. I've done travels, I've shared things on Facebook. Where has, like, why did it take something bad happening to get the support, or something that you agreed with? Like, it's hard, I think. And the second misconception is it is not a chilul Hashem to report abuse. You are
So
protecting children.
let me just
It is
explain the word
not,
Chilul Hashem. Go
yes,
ahead. Yeah, so Chilul Hashem is like it's not what is the word, like defaming God's name, right? It's not embarrassing or saying bad things against God's name by by blasphemizing, I guess you could say, God's name by talking about abuse. So go ahead now. Go ahead and continue what your statement is.
it is every time that anyone reports, it is for the safety of other children. And it doesn't matter if you're worried about being ostracized or if you're worried about the flack. Think about the safety of the child. If anyone that is about to take that step to report something just keeps child centered, then all other misgivings will fade away, because
Mm.
ultimately it is the we as adults are responsible for the safety of children around us. So I think there's a huge fear of people to see abuse happening and not report.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to shift.
Right.
So
I think so. And
yeah,
I think also sometimes there's this feeling of like, no, it can't be what I think I saw, right? Like, no, it's not possible that that's what it was. And kind of like explaining their way out of understanding, no, that is exactly what you saw. And can you please stand up on behalf of the children? You mentioned, there's one thing you mentioned that I just want to explain. You just said that there was a not guilty verdict. And so can you just explain to the audience what that means? I know what that means, but can you explain to the audience
yes.
what that means?
So my sisters and I went through trial together, and there were 27 charges. Any charges relating to myself were found not guilty. All the Most of the charges relating to my two sisters were found guilty. So it was a mixed verdict, not guilty for me and guilty for my sisters.
And what was the explanation? As that was the one thing I had such a difficult time understanding. Why was your, why were your charges thrown out?
We don't hear anything from the jury. I've come to many understandings myself. I think the sheer amount of the abuse which unfortunately the prosecution only gave me a couple of charges, was very not understood as well. The insulation and the closed nature of the community, the lack of understanding, and the control. There wasn't enough context given to any of my charges or the story in general. A lot was missed out. So
Mm-hmm.
that could be why.
Mm-hmm. Such a difficult outcome with such a complicated outcome. And I'm glad that you're able to find meaning in doing these conversations and being an advocate for others and supporting people through it because boy do we need more of your voice in this conversation. So Nicole, thank you. Thank you for being willing to share your experience not only as a survivor but as a mother and what it means to mother in the aftermath of abuse, and really being willing to talk openly and honestly. And I acknowledge that there may be people who are listening that this was really difficult to hear and also who may themselves be survivors. Are you available for somebody to reach out if they wanted some support or connection?
Absolutely. I'm happy to give my email or
We'll put
Instagram,
it
TikTok. Yeah.
Excellent. We're going to put this into the show notes. We talked about the fact that there's a documentary. We have to figure out a way for people in the United States to see the documentary. Maybe you can do some research and we could post that at the same time. I understand you're coming to the US for some kind of a premiere to show it, right, in a few months' time, and maybe we
Well,
can
I don't know if we're
release it or
coming, but it is going to be
it's
premiered
going
in
to,
Atlanta
oh,
at the Jewish Film Festival. We
I
don't know
hope you
yet if we're
come.
coming. I know,
Okay.
I hope
I
so
do
too,
hope
but
you'd
I don't know
come.
if they will bring us there. So it will
Okay.
be, though. It has been confirmed that it will be shown in the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, and that's late February, early March.
Okay, maybe we'll
It
make an
will confirm
effort.
this week.
We'll put whatever information we have in the show notes and release it around that time. So thank you, thank you. I hope that this 2026 year is a good one, a healthy one, a year of tremendous protection for our children and safety and ongoing conversations when there isn't. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.